Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's episode, I have got with me Patrick Cresswell, and he's the co-founder and managing director at ClearWatt. Patrick, thank you ever so much for joining me. It's absolutely lovely to have you on here.
No, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So we're going to talk about the ClearWatt, and it's the ClearWatt app and the services that you offer as an organisation. But let's just start by delving a little bit into your past. I always talk about this anyway because it's good. It gives people a little bit of context about you as a person. So before you co-founded ClearWatt, what was it that you were doing? What was the kind of the reason for you to found the company?
Sure. Well, I should say that at this point I've worked in the EV sector for 11 years, I think it is now.
Okay.
So ClearWatt is not my first toe in the water in the EV space. Previously, I was the managing director of a business called eCar Club, which was an entirely electric car sharing business, which was tiny startup when I joined in 2014, and went on to become a nationwide car sharing outfit in lots of different settings, lots of different types of business model, both B2B, B2C and B2B2C. And it caught the attention of the Europe Car Mobility Group, who were acquiring car sharing brands across Europe with some pace at the middle part of last decade. And so they acquired eCar Club, and I took over as managing director at that point, and took responsibility for all of Europe Car's electric and urban mobility strategy from that point forward, which I did for a couple of years, and I think was kind of at the sharp end of the very early days of EV adoption, obviously from more a rental and super short-term sharing kind of perspective through that group. But I think noticing what was happening with the sector, particularly around the sort of early 2020s, where the numbers went super high in terms of EV registrations, it just occurred to me that everybody was very much focused on brand new EVs and the sort of newest tech and all of these extra range that's coming next year and all of these things which I completely understand from an emerging technology perspective. But it just became clear to me that very few people really had their eye on what happens when those vehicles finish that first ownership cycle of typically 3 or 4 years and end up on the second-hand market. What does that sector look like? And so ClearWatt was really born out of a very deep gap analysis as to what is the information missing for that to be a healthy, sort of buoyant market. So ClearWatt was basically born out of that thinking and that experience.
Fantastic. I was going to say, you're talking about the tech and how people were looking at the new vehicles. I kind of was thinking it's a bit like a four-wheeled iPhone, isn't it? People kind of see kind of EVs like that because the tech is so different, and a lot of the cars look quite different. I've looked at the new Renault 5e that's coming in, and I'm quite excited because I really want to I want to take that for a test drive because it just looks amazing. Yeah. But yeah, like you say, once they've gone through that first owner cycle, whether that's part of a fleet or whether that's somebody who goes to a regular kind of 3-year cycle anyway, that's the really important bit, isn't it? So yeah. Can you, when it goes on to that second-hand market, then what is it? If you can explain what ClearWatt is, what it does, and how it can help EV drivers who are buying into that second-hand market.
Yes, absolutely. So ClearWatt is now a number of things. So it's not as simple to explain as maybe it was even certainly 12 months ago. In that the business has evolved around technology that we have built, really on the journey of bringing transparency to second-hand EVs. So the core of our technology is our EV battery health analysis tool, which is delivered via our mobile app, and that's a very deliberate move that we made. So in the early days of ClearWatt, we won some funding from the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles and the Department for Transport, who were very plugged into sorry, no pun intended there. Genuinely no pun intended there.
I like it. It's good.
I was going to say they're very switched on, but you could say that's a light bulb. I mean, I'm really not trying to do this, but they were very aware of the issues surrounding the second-hand market, because the second-hand car market in general is incredibly important, right? It's where 80% of all car sales happen per year is on the second-hand market. And there is no currently, there certainly was no agreed methodology for measuring battery health, and no truly accessible services where you're able to do that. And so we want some funding to explore ways in which we could achieve that, and the core ClearWatt product was born out of that project. And so what it is a mobile app whereby a customer would download it and add their car to it, and then they have the opportunity to connect their car to our app via their own first person app that they will have for the vehicle. So by that I mean, the Tesla app if you're a Tesla driver, and what have you. So within our app, we open up the login screen so that you can connect that to us and share that data with us. But we also have a manual version of our app where you don't need to do that, which is more suitable for dealers and people involved in vehicle movements, for example, who will never have the companion app for that vehicle. But once you are connected, what ClearWatt is doing is pulling data from the car whilst pulling data from your mobile phone, and it's really the marrying of those two sets of information which is completely unique to ClearWatt. And the reason that's really important is if you don't have the connection to the phone, let's say, and you're just communicating with the car, there is only so much data you can pull from the car, and there's only so much frequency from which you can make those calls for information. So Tesla, for example, is renowned for having the best data available, but it's a very different picture if you get into some of the different brands and certainly older vehicles, and you can't communicate with the car very often. It's in minutes, not seconds. But what we are doing at the same time is communicating with the mobile phone of the customer every second at its slowest. So what it essentially means is that we're able to draw your trip on a map. Every time you get into your car and drive it, we detect that you're moving, you're in a car, we call your car and say, are you moving, are you in the same location? And then we start to draw out that trip on within our back end. But obviously what we're doing there is by communicating with your phone and the GPS and accelerometer and all of the sensors in your phone in such high frequency, we're able to see how fast you're driving, how quickly you're accelerating, all of those things. We're also able to see what the weather is like where you are, whether you're driving into a headwind, the gradient of the elevation of the road, etc. And really the ClearWatt system is accounting for those things, such that whereas on the one hand we've pulled your charge level information from the car directly, on the other hand we've understood okay, so if that means you've consumed X amount of energy on a journey, what are the both driver and environmental conditions that will have influenced that energy consumption figure? Like, were you driving like a lunatic in the freezing cold, or and working back from extremities like that? And from that, we're able to get a really true sense of how efficient your car is and how many miles it will do on a full charge, from which we make assumptions about battery health. And so that's kind of the very highly accessible front end service that we provide. What then happens afterwards when we spot a car that appears to have issues is we have almost an escalation flow from there, whereby we have a charging test routine that we ask people to go through to validate what we found from the app, and one or two other things. So I guess one of the key messages, I suppose, through all of that is to say EV battery health is holding up fairly well, and we knew that when we started this. And really, the key challenge is one of confidence and providing a really simple way for people to feel like they're not buying a dud, or and so the app does that. And if there is cause for escalation, then we have we have things in our armory there. That's sort of one side of the business, and the other bits to mention is at this point we have tested an awful lot of cars. We've been in testing now for a couple of years. We're operational across 4 continents, and we're actually now live. We launched the app live in January, but prior to that we've been in beta testing mode for some time, and so millions and millions of data points have been through our algorithms and our sort of self-learning engine, and we're in a place where we're able to provide really kind of interesting data services as a byproduct of that, because we've now tested, for example, enough types of 3-year-olds, I don't know, Tesla Model 3 or whatever, whereby if you tell us the age of the car and how many miles it's done, we can feed back to you how many miles range you can expect from that car in different conditions. And obviously there's a pretty big caveat on that, which is to say that this car may have been, had been poorly treated or whatever, and it could fall outside of that, but the likelihood is it will fall within the range that we estimate. And so on the data services side of the business, we're in the process of launching a product called EV Check Plus, where anybody is able to come to our website, give us the license plate number and the mileage of the car, and we will return to you 3 pages of information about that car. Many of those things are estimates, particularly around range and battery health, but they're substantiated estimates. And in addition to that, we have lots of other very black and white things, like how many charge points are there in the car in the UK that this car is compatible with, where is the charging port located, just simple things that would be otherwise difficult to find. And then we also have a full page of vehicle history data as well, which we pull in from Experian and other trusted third parties, which will tell that person whether the car's been in an accident or any outstanding finance and things like that. So yeah, sorry, it wasn't a short answer, but it's becoming a longer answer, in that ClearWatt is ... it's kind of really to be thought of as 2 pillars. There's like battery health testing on one side, and all of that data that we're gathering and learning from there is being aggregated into the other pillar, which is like data services.
I mean, that in itself is excellent, and I have actually got your EV Check Plus in front of me that I've used, because you kindly sent me a link, and actually, yeah, it's really interesting, because I gave so it was the year of manufacture, the make and model of the vehicle, and how many miles were on the clock. So at the time submitting it, I was at about, so it's 34,000, just over 34,000 miles. And it is really interesting, because it's kind of it's even got remaining warranty mileage, so you get that, so saying, because people who've not bought a second-hand EV don't recognise, or an EV full stop, they don't recognise that the warranty is a lot longer, isn't it, for an EV than most combustion engine vehicles.
Yeah, well, I think what a lot of people don't realise is that the vehicle has a standard warranty, then it has an additional battery warranty, and so of all of the things on that report, that's probably the simplest thing that we provide, but it's one of the most valuable, I think, in that people don't realise that is even a thing.
And so, and it's saying my remaining warranty time is 4 years and 7 months. How long the MOT is valid for. There's all sorts of stuff in here. Like you say, it's where the charging port is, that it'll take AC Type 2 charging, DC charging, CCS, you know, and how yeah. So it's got actually it's interesting. I'll talk to you later about it, about the kind of type 2 charging, but the information that you provide on there, even if it's just basic, and it's really, it's in fact no, it's not basic. The information you provide on there is so important for people who are buying used EVs. And I said to you before we started recording, and everybody who's been listening for a while knows that we bought our Hyundai Ioniq. That was a used EV, and we didn't have a clue. We would not have known whether it didn't have a lot of miles. I think it had about 14,000 miles on the clock, or 12,000 when we bought it.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have had a clue about battery health, and people don't.
People don't, and also it's. I think with the way that we communicate battery health and all of the stuff around it, we're sort of we're tackling other issues in with the same product, and by that I mean that there's a general lack of information out there. I mean, there are lots and lots of dealer websites I could point you to, and I won't name names, but huge top 10 UK dealerships where if you're looking at a listing for an electric vehicle and you click into tech specs or something like that, it'll start with engine size 0
Yes,
to C.
yes, I know exactly what you're. Yeah. I've seen that.
And so people say to me with that product, the EV Check Plus report, who are your main competitors? And it's like, well, I don't know really. I mean, certainly we have competitors with the vehicle history and provenance stuff and surfacing things like experience checks and stuff. That's quite an established business, right? But for just much better EV data that is both completely objective and just a nice way of pulling together OEM data that's consumable and understandable. That's a lot of what we do. But then, the additional layer on top of that, which is very unique to ClearWatt, is the aggregated estimates that we're able to provide from all of the testing that we've now done. It's an exciting time. Like at the moment in the UK, there are 25,000 used EV sales per month on average. That's set to just keep growing and growing, and with the EV Check Plus product, it's one where anybody can come to our website and within a couple of minutes retrieve that report. You don't have to test a car, there's a pretty big market there. I think who are in many ways scratching their head, confused about all of the numbers and requiring more information, and that's really where that comes in.
And like you say, the dealerships themselves that have got those missing sections, or the sections that start engine size or whatever, they're kind of missing that trick, aren't they? And what you're doing is you're making it it is easily accessible information, isn't it?
Yeah.
No.
And I think that the other part of the challenge, and this is a really big challenge, is that particularly on the topic of range, there is that there are official figures available for every car, certainly sold in the last, I think, 8 years ago, WLTP was brought in, something like that. But the WLTP, the World Light Testing Protocol process, is a laboratory-based test, which then results in often very optimistic range estimates, and so it's a pretty serious issue where you've got people taking a vehicle because they thought it was capable of 250 miles of range, and the best they ever get out of it is less than 200, and maybe you can halve that in the winter. Maybe that's exaggerating, but the sector needs to do so much more in terms of managing those type of expectations. We work with some leasing clients, for example, who are suffering from early terminations because their customers have agreed to a contract for a vehicle on the basis of performance figures which are unachievable, and so the real range figures that we include on our reports therefore become really important. And the other thing that I should say about what ClearWatt is and what ClearWatt does is that we provide those types of information like that available via API. So we're working with partners to embed ClearWatt range estimates on the pages of leasing vehicles. So, for example, I think by the time this goes live, this podcast will be up and running with Love Electric, obviously a big salary sacrifice broker, and a number of others like it, where I guess we're just improving the digital ecosystem where people are shopping for electric vehicles by providing that kind of better data.
And actually, just going back to what you said about early termination, if you're talking about early termination of a lease, the knock-on effect of that, you know, it can be massive throughout the second-hand market, or maybe even lease companies can't afford to pass, to get rid of that. But therefore they end up increasing the lease costs, don't they? Because they've not made that money back. So there's kind of quite a big knock-on effect with that inaccurate information at the beginning with regards to the WLTP, sort of the range finger in the air jobby.
Absolutely, yeah. The ramifications are serious. An early terminated vehicle obviously is no longer brand new, so it can't be released as a brand new vehicle. It's depreciated an awful lot through that whole episode, and the leasing costs are there, and they have to swallow that. That risk needs to be included, and so there we go.
I was going to say, what then needs to change with regards to WLTP? Do they need to be having the WLTP range and then actually getting your product, for example, and then kind of looking at it and changing the WLTP, basically saying, right, okay, this is what we had, but this is what we know? Because WLTP was, we didn't know. I always say this, you don't know what you don't know. So like you say, if it's kind of a bit more positive and a bit, I'm not saying massaged, that's not what I'm saying, but if it's not quite as accurate as it should be, then surely that needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I completely agree with that, and when you ask the question, should it be side by side WLTP and then something more realistic, well, that's where a lot of our business development focus is, but it's being decided on a company by company basis. It's not being legislated that more realistic range figures should be included, although there are murmurings in that direction. It's something that Fair Charge and Quentin Wilson, I think it's a particular bugbear of his, and there is some pressure for that to become more realistic, because the WLTP test cycle, the one thing that you can say about it is that it is at least a fair test. So for people with, let's say, 3 EVs in mind that they're considering buying, it's useful to compare between the 3 of them. But if you believe that number is what you're likely to get, then you're likely to be sorely disappointed. And that's especially true if it's a second-hand vehicle, because the delta between the WLTP figure and what you actually get from that car obviously increases over time as battery degradation occurs, because even in the best case scenario, batteries do degrade, so it will only ever continue to get wider and wider. So you end up in a situation where if you're on a classified website and you're looking at range displayed on that advert, it's sort of a double whammy almost. It's like it was not right when the car was new, and it's certainly not right anymore.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. And actually there are some vehicle makes and vehicles or EVs that are not quite as efficient as they make out to be. The manufacturers make them out to be. We're quite lucky with the Ioniq actually, because it is it's got a small battery, but it's fairly efficient anyway. Yeah. So we would have liked to have had something that could do 250 miles to a full charge, and that was kind of something that if we'd have known a little bit more, if we'd have had your app then it would have it's still about making those informed choices, isn't it? Having the information. And actually I was thinking about going again back to the dealership and the leasing companies. Education will help that, and also help decrease the amount of negativity, because as that person who's teaching you or passing that information on, then hopefully then more people understand that this is the realistic range, the real world, and it's meeting people's expectations then, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I know that the negative press is a bugbear of yours and everybody else in this sector, but with the current state of play, I feel like we're just always going to go into winter time and the tabloid press have the same story to run every single year, which is, oh, look, these EV drivers are only getting 60% of the quoted range for these cars. That will just happen in perpetuity until this gets sort of sorted in one way or the other.
It is, it's just one of those things, isn't it? And because of batteries and cold weather and being in the UK, that's just kind of what we get, really. But it to me, it's about honesty, it's about transparency, and actually not just making sure that like the dealerships and the leasing companies, etc., actually are able to provide that transparency, so that you don't get people coming back, 2 years into their lease or a year and a half into their lease, for example, and saying, not having this, I need to be doing 250 miles with, to one charge, and I'm only getting, I'm getting 195 or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully it'll stop that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, okay, when we're talking about feedback from the customers that you've been working with already, whether they are, people who've downloaded the app, etc. And like you said, you've been testing for a couple of years, and I have had your app on my phone, and I'm just terrible with things. So I've done a little test, but you had to do, I think it was 3 tests, didn't you? And I've got a memory, like I say, in certain cases. So I did it, and I just thought, do you know what, we've got to do this. But then when me and you got talking, as in, now it's gone live, right? Okay, well, I now know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the first thing to say is that we've had like really, really amazing feedback, and we've had a huge spread across different territories that we weren't expecting, and it's not been through any proactive kind of effort of ours, but we have a lot of users in Australia, for example, and increasingly in mainland Europe as well, where people are really, I think, worried about this stuff, and a lot of the time. So yeah, it's probably worth just saying that we originally anticipated that the app would be primarily used at the point of resale. So, person selling car wants to improve the process of selling the car, whether that's through being able to ask for a bit more money because they can prove the battery's fine, or less people coming around to kick the tyres at the weekend or whatever, because they've answered that question.
Yeah.
What we've actually had is a lot of people who already have the car and they don't intend to sell it anytime soon, but for the reasons we've just been talking about, particularly around range, they're worried that they've got an issue with the vehicle, and what they're actually looking for is some peace of mind that they haven't, or confirmation that they have, and a means of escalating that and what have you. So we launched properly in January this year, and we have different ways of measuring the success of that. Obviously, there's a revenue component and commercial metrics, but in terms of actual like customer satisfaction, I think we're at the time of recording this, we're at like 4.7 on the app stores, and we have a net promoter score of 44, which we're like incredibly proud of. Almost everyone who gives us that feedback is we just see 8s, 9s, and 10s in terms of whether you'd recommend this to a friend. So yeah, we're really, really happy about that. On the point that you made there about forgetting to do the test, it's probably a good moment to talk about what we have by means of tech roadmap and where the product has evolved. So when we initially built the tech, we the way that it works is that we ask the customer to complete a set of drives, and each of those drives needs to be of a minimum trip duration, and that gives us we calculated, and it depends on the car itself, but we calculated what the minimum distance needs to be for us to be able to run our calculations. But we obviously were aware that asking customers to remember to start a trip and stop a trip is not that was never the long-term goal. It was kind of what we needed to do with our real keen beta testing community, who were, you know, evangelists and sort of, you know, frankly a bit geeky about this stuff. Those guys do remember.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say I'm a bit geeky, but I'm also neurospicy, which means that I can remember to put it on when I set off, but forgetting it when I get to the other end. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, flipping heck.
Yeah. So the process that you were doing there is what we know internally as the active flow. But what we have built since then, and are in the process of rolling out now, again, it depends which vehicle you drive, how quickly this will be rolled out, but we're already offering this to a number of vehicles in our database, whereby it is a completely passive process, and what you're asked to do is, if you want a ClearWatt battery health report, you download the ClearWatt app and add your car to it, and then just forget about it. Basically, you put your phone in your pocket, and when your report is ready, we'll send you an email to tell you it's ready. And we're able to do that via passive data collection from both your car and your phone, and marrying those two pieces of information together. So you know, that to us is the scalable version of the ClearWatt app. So yeah, it's quite an exciting development that's happening as we speak in terms of the rollout.
So I am definitely. I promise you, I will definitely do that. If that's, like I say, I was just thinking while we were talking earlier on. I thought maybe I should just put a post-it on my seat, you know, to remind me to start and stop. But if it's that easy, then, you know, everybody should be downloading your app and actually having a look. Because do you know what? To me, in some ways, it's about getting a house price for your house when you don't intend to, you know, sell it.
Yeah.
You know, it's that midway point, isn't it, or part way through, because you want to know its value. You want to know, you know, with a vehicle, you want to know what the battery health is, or what, you know, if there's anything, like you say, if there's anything that needs escalating, because you might have missed something yourself. That you don't get that in a house price, you know, when you get kind of an estate agent round. So, but this information is invaluable, I think.
Yeah, and you know, again, we have to be really careful about not naming names, but we have like there's a customer that springs to mind who has got an EV, which is quite a premium car, and it's done less than 10,000 miles. So
Yeah.
we don't believe that it's suffered from you know, calendar and cyclic battery degradation, which happens over time. But it's ever since he's had it, has had a really, really poor range. It will achieve probably half of what we would expect for that car. And our expectations are not WLTP. You know, that's our realistic expectation. And he's been back and forth with the manufacturer, and is actually in the process of taking them to court. He's spent quite a lot of money on it on this, because he won't sort of take what they're saying lying down, really, because every time he goes in, it's the same story, which is you must have a really heavy right foot. You know, turn your heated seats off, those sorts of things, and you know, he knows that that's not right, but without something in his hand, then it's very, very difficult to argue the toss with the quote unquote experts, I suppose. And so you know, it's a real part of why we do what we do is to empower people in that situation. Not to turn this negative and say suggest that's a common experience, but definitely enabling consumers to know the reality is, I think, absolutely essential to the adoption of electric vehicles.
I totally agree. And actually, people who have listen to me talk about our vehicle, and I don't know whether I've gone into it too much, but I have a bit. But with regards to kind of the local our local dealership, I've been really disappointed with them, and actually so much so that we are due a service, and I probably won't go there. I'd rather go north of Reading. We're in Caversham, which is north anyway, but I'd rather go up to Oxford just to avoid it. You know, because actually I don't know whether to be honest, I'm sorry that, you know, people don't like me saying this, but actually I want to have an honest opinion. And like you say, you know, it's a bit like going to a doctor and saying I've had a headache for 3 weeks, and them saying to you, nah, it's all right. You just take some paracetamols, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know, you're just imagining it, which is just it. You just can't do this. You need to be able to trust this information, and if you can't trust what you're getting from the dealerships, partly because, especially with our local dealership, they haven't got the technicians and they haven't got the ability to be able to do the deep diagnostics in the way that they should be able to.
Well, that's a segue that people are probably going to think is planned, and it's just completely unplanned. But one of the other things on our roadmap is, before very long, we're going to have like a map on our website where we want to mark who the dealerships are that are who are interacting with us and using ClearWatt products, like in the showroom and on the forecourt. We're actually in the process of a very exciting partnership with the National Franchise Dealers Association, who run the EVA accreditation kite mark. So if you're a franchise dealer and you can demonstrate that you have met the minimum threshold of expertise in the dealership, and there's a whole list of things, then you reach the EVA accreditation. But yeah, there are some additional very exciting things that are coming with ClearWatt partnerships there, such that you know, we want to help people navigate the exact thing that you've just mentioned there, and you know, find a dealer who is being proactive about this stuff, and the sort of the transfer and translation of complex information, you know, helped along by ClearWatt, I think is just an easy way for dealers to show that they care about this stuff, really.
Oh, and that'd be, do you know what, Patrick, that would be fantastic. And I've got to say, actually, do you know what, I just want to point out to everybody watching and listening that I know that it's not just EVs that this problem happens with dealerships. I know that there aren't enough technicians around the country to actually, you know, kind of manage ICE vehicles, never mind EVs. But it's about, you know, making sure that there are more apprentices come in, you know, and they're employed and they go up the ranks because they can start level 2 and upwards, you know, and actually just like you say, to see that on a map for proactive dealerships would just be wonderful, because to me, you just, I've learned so much from this podcast. If I hadn't been, you know, talking to people like yourself, and I was just, you know, I had no information, you just go, you kind of bumble around, don't you? And all, because and talking about negativity, as we said earlier, because there's so much negativity out there, you end up falling into a trap of reading this stuff. I've had friends who've read this kind of negative stuff and they just believe it because they don't know what anything different. But if they're going to a reputable website like yours and you've got that information on there, that's kind of just gives that level of trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I use like on my phone, I use like the Apple News app, and you know, you tell it what your interests are. And I made the mistake of saying electric vehicles because, you know, it sifts through all of the broadsheets and everyone else, and that's you just end up with an absolute a cauldron of bad press. Basically, it's just it makes looking at the news very depressing. I should probably just proactively remove it.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Actually, the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel for this podcast, because people who are quite sceptical about EVs, if they put something in about it, this YouTube channel, because we put quite a lot of shorts on YouTube, it gets promoted. Oh my God, and I just have to stop. My son's even said, because he kind of monitors our YouTube channel, and he said, I've deleted some comments, Mum, because, you know, you don't want to be reading that kind of stuff. And I'm like, right, okay, fair enough, that's fine, because it's hard not to kind of go, oh my God, where
Yeah.
did that come from? You know? So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of people I think trying to tackle that at the moment. Obviously, there's EV UK and a really concerted, proactive effort to I guess improve the news landscape in this arena. So yeah, hopefully we're over the worst of it, but we'll see.
Yeah, and actually having something like your products, I can only see that as a real benefit to everybody, you know. And because so I was going to ask you, and we did talk about this briefly before we start recording. What are your thoughts about integrating your product? Or I mean, obviously this is slightly different, but we look at the MOT. So with the MOT for ICE vehicles, it's very specific. You know what you're getting. You know all the things that need to be ticked off. With an electric vehicle, there's a lot less, but there isn't anything at the moment, is there, on kind of battery health? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are, it would be nice, wouldn't it?
Fabulous.
The issue is that I guess what you're asking me here about is regulation, because basically there's no short answer to this, but I'll try and be succinct. Currently, there is no agreed standard for the way that battery health is measured from OEM to OEM. So if you were to get into like the guts of a vehicle, which you would typically do by plugging hardware into it, if you know where to look, you can often find a parameter there called SOH, right, state of health.
Yes.
And so you can retrieve that number, which is presented as a percentage, and you know, hey presto, you've got the battery health for that car, or so it would seem. The difficulty is that there is no, as I say, there is no agreed standard. So that measurement that you'll pull from manufacturer X means something completely different to the measurement that you would pull from manufacturer Y. And throw into the mix of that, you've got competing, or not competing, but variable motivations behind what they're trying to do with that number. So this is probably it's might be a bit of a shock for you as a Hyundai owner, but
Oh God, tell me, tell me.
Well, typically, you know, there are some manufacturers out there, Hyundai included, who you know, they provide a buffer and they keep that number at 100% for as long as possible. So your reading, I would imagine, if you took it to a Hyundai garage and asked them to retrieve the state of health, even at 34,000 miles, it will say this vehicle has not degraded at all, which, you know, from a chemistry perspective isn't possible, aside from the fact that what they've probably done is built a buffer on top of, like you had more than 100% to start with.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Which therefore, you know, they're not doing anything underhand. That's not the suggestion here, but it's, you're not comparing apples with apples when you're looking at an OEM who doesn't engage with something like that. And so, knowing all of this, the government here in the UK, over in Brussels, and then above that, like at the United Nations, are looking to implement a global standard for battery health, which forces manufacturers to provide a measurement for battery health, which can be compared from brand to brand, and also is easily accessible. Like, you don't need an onboard diagnostic dongle to go and get the number. It's either on the dashboard or it's in the companion app. And so that's a piece of legislation called GTR number 22, Global Technical Regulation. And that was originally supposed to be included in the Euro 7 new emissions legislation, which the EU were due to launch this year, although that's been kicked down the road now to 2027 at the earliest. Okay. And if it does come in 2027, then that will mean that brand new vehicles sold in the European Union will need to include that number on the car somewhere. The UK still hasn't decided whether it's going to sign up to GCR number 22, but you can see that, to your point about MOCs, it's not really possible to do that unless there is an agreed standard. Otherwise, you're going to run into the issues like I've just mentioned there. So yeah, it's a tricky area, and particularly when we think about used cars. Let's say that the UK decide to follow Europe on implementation of GTR number 22. What that will mean is brand new cars sold here from 2027 will have that number on the dashboard, but 3-4 year ownership cycle, you're into next decade before those cars end up on Auto Trader. So it's like, what do you do between now and then? So that for us is why ClearWatt's a really important now thing, but will continue to be in the future as well, because what we're really building is an enormous data set to be able to A, read from cars, but B, tell you whether that's good, bad, or somewhere in the middle for that car. And I think long term, even if we do implement the GTR, I think we'll have a big role to play as the kind of a huge global database of how EVs are performing and where they should be for their age and mileage. So there's my long-winded answer to the MOT question, but to reiterate my short answer to the question, it would be great, and it would allow people to have real simple clarity at the point of a 3 year. It happens when the car becomes 3 years old, and then obviously it's annual after that. Being able to give people that during how long is an MOT? A couple of hours sort of thing would be great, but I think it's not realistic really for practical reasons, which is again why we exist. Probably this is a time for another plug as well, because
no, go for it.
Roadmap. We are what we talked about with the ClearWatt app and the battery health certificate is it being something that somebody retrieves on a one-time basis, whether they are looking for peace of mind and reassurance today, or whether they are selling their car tomorrow. That's like one way of thinking about ClearWatt. But some of the feedback that we've had from a lot of our customers has been, I want to dip into this on a monthly basis. Where's the version of the app that's a monthly subscription? And we are pulling lots and lots of information that would be a really, really nice universal companion app for EV owners of all shapes and sizes, whether that's business, company car drivers as well, or private individuals. So that will enable us to, if you connect your car up to ClearWatt over the period that you own it, by the end of that period, we would be able to compile some insights about how the car has been treated. How many times has it been rapid charged, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, we can sort of coexist with annual MOTs in that a connected car to the ClearWatt system can tell you everything that you can't get at an MOT that is EV specific.
Having that information available, Patrick, is a bit, to me, it's a bit of a game changer, because what you're like I said to you, I see a specific I'm getting specific mileage in winter, so if I know that I get probably around 4 miles per kilowatt hour, for example, driving in like 6 degrees or something like that, or maybe slightly more, and then and I do try and make sure that I don't drive it like I stole it, we've got a home charger, we don't rapid charge it as often as I used to do when we first got it. So having that kind of information, the full picture, it's a bit like, I know I always keep giving these analogies today, but my husband we've got like the Give Energy app, and we've got a heat pump, we've got solar panels, and we've got a battery. And he's a bit, he loves looking at, he's a bit obsessed with it, to be honest. I'm sorry, Rich, if you're listening. But actually, that having it then provides you with that ability to see what your usage is over a 12-month period, because actually you can look at it weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, and this is what I see your app being, kind of moving forwards, that ability to be able to have a look at the whole picture. And if you are selling it, you've got that whole picture to be able to go, here you go, this is how it's performed on a yearly basis with this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things in that. The first thing to say is that there's like a list of good things that you can do in terms of how you treat
Yeah.
battery of an EV, and there's a list of bad things you can do. But I really don't think that that's common knowledge, and I'm careful not to criticise people who do rapid charge the car all the time, because quite often they've got no idea that that's a bad thing to do. And so, you know, what we're talking about releasing here is like really simple sort of do's and don'ts, and helping to educate people on that first thing. And yeah, I'll just end with an anecdote about all of this. Really, I suppose, you know, my dad's an EV driver, and he got his vehicle through a company car lease, and knowing what I do, knowing that he shouldn't rapid charge it, he never once rapid charged that car. And when it came to give the car back, he just had no means of like passing that information back on to the leasing company, and therefore and thereafter the person who owned the car. And it's quite sweet, really. But he like hand wrote in the logbook of the car, "This car has never been on a rapid charger." But I think, you know, if that is in 2025 the current best state of play that we can do to transfer that important information over from owner one to owner two, then there's the gap. And that's what we're filling.
You're right.
It's very, very important that,
And
that people
actually,
do know that.
we have to remember that there are a lot of people who haven't got drives, who haven't got home chargers, and they have to use a rapid because of how they, you know, because of how they work, they live, whatever they have to do. So I suppose my question then, so what you're kind of alluding to the fact that it's really bad. Is my question.
Well, not in isolation, I would say. I mean, there's like a whole a whole bunch of things that you could be doing in collaboration that, you know, if you do regularly, would be bad for the vehicle. So it's not just rapid charging, but it's you know, keeping the car above 80%, let's say, because you know, most modern EVs will try and stop you from being able to do that, but you have the ability to override it. And for people that, you know, again, I'm not criticising here, but if you're a company car driver and all you care about is range, and that, you know, you need to get from one side of the country to the other every day, then you're going to do that. But it's things like that, plus rapid charging, plus, you know, letting it drop to a super low charge level, and big depths of discharge. And so there's a whole concoction of different things, and it gets really complicated. And again, you know, we just like, we don't expect, you know, ClearWatt exists to help EVs hit the mainstream, particularly used EVs, and we don't expect it to be a mainstream. In the mainstream consciousness that you could pick somebody off the high street and say, what's bad for an EV battery? Of course not, you know. But we just want to make it really simple to nudge people kind of in the right direction. So yeah, we're on it basically.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that actually, if you think about combustion engine vehicles, people rev the hell out of them. They let their right foot kind of lead the way, and also some, you know, people who run out of petrol and things like that. So it doesn't matter what vehicle you have, does it really? What I'm saying is, you know, there will be something that you'll do that will be bad for it, but it's about mitigating that, and it's about doing the right things. And going back to what you said, it's kind of your app is providing that ability to see that information, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's quite an interesting analogy there, because, you know, if you're talking about a Vauxhall Corsa, I don't suppose these things exist, but if you talk about more premium type of ICE vehicles, like if you bought a Porsche 911, for example, you can take it to Porsche and they will give you an over rev report. Like, they can plug something in and see if it's been in the red line. So there is kind of a precedent here for what we're talking about, because when the stakes are high, like, you know, the traction battery of an EV is worth about 40% of the value of the business of the vehicle. When the stakes are high, there is precedent for that knowledge being surfaced and presented to the customer, and I guess that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So final point, have you got any specific advice for a non-EV driver who is considering buying an EV second-hand, used, or an EV driver who's maybe changing their lease or moving, they're considering buying a used EV? Maybe they've gone from new and now they're buying, that way.
Well, the first thing I would say is do it. I mean, there's some incredible value for money at the moment, and I don't know if it's going to stay quite where it is in terms of residual value. So I think it's a good time to buy a used EV, and it's something I did myself last year and haven't looked back really. And obviously, my recommendation is going to be to make sure you check out the vehicle with ClearWatt's products, and we provide a really simple means of doing that whilst you're shopping. If you've got, let's say you've got 3 or 4 tabs open and you're on Auto Trader and you're looking at different vehicles, we have a report where from your phone or from your sofa, we can provide a really in-depth view of the proposition right in front of you. And then if you take delivery of that car and you want to just double check it, then we've got that too. So shameless plug there, but I feel like you really teed me up for that one.
Of course I did. Of course I did. And what's the next 3 to 5 years going to look like for ClearWatt then? Just as a final question.
I think we're just very much in go mode now. We're having launched in January, and we're taking on lots and lots and lots of new customers on a daily basis from all over the world, and so we're just really on tech roadmap delivery mode, because we've got ideas and developments emerging all the time that I think are really going to help further the cause here of used EVs. So just continual product development and expansion would be the 2 main things to note, I would say.
Fantastic. Oh, listen, it's been absolutely riveting listening to you. Thank you ever so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Just to everybody watching and listening, I'll just say to you, as I always do now, please elevate this, because actually what Patrick's just said, we need people to know about the ClearWatt app. We're going to get more people coming through the used EV market now than ever. So we really, really need people to actually be able to use ClearWatt to actually make that informed decision. So please interact with the podcast, share it with people, just comment on our posts on LinkedIn and all of the other channels that we use. But yeah, anything you can do, like, subscribe, share, the whole whammy. So thank you to Patrick, really appreciate your time. And for everybody else watching and listening, I shall see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching Electric Evolution. I really love bringing you these weekly conversations about sustainability, renewables, and building a cleaner future together. If you're passionate about positive change, please like, subscribe, and share with others who also care about these topics. You can also download our white paper, Plugging into the Future, at fullcircleci.co.uk and join the discussion on improving sustainable transport, or email me at liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks for watching. Bye.